In a quiet suburban kitchen in Maple Glen, a widowed schoolteacher named Claire Mitchell was about to lose control of the life she spent decades building. What started as a warm family dinner with her son and daughter-in-law took a shocking turn when she came face to face with a folder labeled Senior Living Options for Mom, Moving Date Scheduled For. Claire Mitchell wasn't your typical 58-year-old retiree. For over 30 years, she had raised her son alone while working as a respected educator, known for her sharp mind, self-reliance, and fierce pride in her independence. When she saw her daughter-in-law, Marissa, calmly place brochures on the table, she had no idea she was walking into a carefully orchestrated intervention. Claire's reaction, part disbelief, part fury, would lead to a confrontation that tore open years of buried resentment, unspoken fears, and strained loyalties. What began as a simple family meal would become a reckoning with age, identity, and autonomy. The Mitchell household would never be the same after that night, and neither would Claire. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Claire Mitchell had always prided herself on setting a proper table. Tonight was no exception. The dining room gleamed under the soft chandelier light, her grandmother's china reflecting the warm glow across the mahogany surface she'd polished that morning. Fresh daisies from her garden served as the centerpiece, their cheerful faces a stark contrast to the storm that was about to break over her carefully ordered world. "Mom, this roast is incredible," Ethan said, cutting another piece with the deliberate precision she remembered from his childhood. At 32, her son still possessed that same methodical approach to everything. Except, Claire had begun to notice when it came to standing up for himself. "The recipe was your grandmother's," Claire replied, watching as Marissa pushed her vegetables around her plate with mechanical efficiency. Her daughter-in-law had been unusually quiet tonight, her normally animated chatter replaced by an odd tension that made Claire's shoulders tighten. Marissa cleared her throat, the sound cutting through the comfortable rhythm of silverware against china. "Actually, Claire, there's something Ethan and I wanted to discuss with you." The words hung in the air like smoke from an extinguished candle. Claire set down her fork, noting how Ethan's eyes immediately found his lap. In 32 years of motherhood, she'd learned to read the signs. This wasn't going to be about vacation plans or weekend visits. "Oh." Claire kept her voice steady, though something cold began unfurling in her chest. Marissa reached beside her chair and produced a manila folder, thick with what appeared to be brochures and documents. She placed it on the table with the care of someone defusing a bomb. The label, written in Marissa's precise handwriting, felt like a slap across Claire's face. Senior Living Options for Mom, Moving Date Scheduled For. The words blurred together as Claire stared at the folder. The room seemed to tilt, the carefully arranged evening suddenly feeling like an elaborate trap. "We've been researching the best facilities in the area," Marissa continued, her voice taking on the brisk, professional tone she used at her marketing job. "Sunset Manor has an excellent reputation, and they have an opening available next month. We've already put down a deposit." Claire's hand moved instinctively to her throat, where her pulse hammered against her fingers. "I'm sorry, what?" "Mom?" Ethan finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "We're worried about you living alone. The incident last month when you fell in the garden." "I tripped," Claire said sharply. "I tripped over the garden hose and scraped my knee. That hardly constitutes a medical emergency." "But what if it had been worse?" Marissa leaned forward, her expression earnest but somehow condescending. "What if you'd broken something? What if you'd hit your head?" "Ethan and I lie awake at night worrying about these scenarios." Claire felt something hot and dangerous rising in her chest. "So you decided to plan my future without consulting me?" The silence stretched between them like a chasm. Ethan's fork clinked against his plate as his hand trembled slightly. Marissa's jaw tightened, and Claire recognized the look, the same expression she wore when arguing with difficult clients. "We're not planning your future," Marissa said carefully. "We're ensuring you have one, a safe one." Claire pushed back from the table, the chair legs scraping against the hardwood floor with a sound like nails on glass. "Safe? You want to talk? About safety? I've lived in this house for 23 years. I raised my son here. I've survived divorce, single motherhood, a career in public education, and every other challenge life has thrown at me. And now you're telling me I'm not capable of deciding where I want to live? That's not," Marissa began. "Don't." Claire's voice cut through the protest like a blade. "Don't you dare minimize what you've done here. You've ambushed me. In my own home. During what I thought was a nice family dinner." She turned to Ethan, who still hadn't lifted his gaze from his plate. "And you're going to sit there and let your wife make decisions about my life?" Ethan's shoulders hunched forward as if trying to disappear into himself. "Mom, please. We just want what's best for you." "What's best for me?" Claire's laugh came out sharp and bitter. "When exactly did I become incapable of determining that for myself? Was it when I turned 58? When my hair started graying? When I needed reading glasses?" Marissa's professional composure began to crack. "You're being unreasonable. We've done extensive research. Sunset Manor has a beautiful garden, activities, medical staff on site 24 hours a day. It has other people's schedules, other people's food, other people's rules," Claire shot back. "It has everything except my choice in the matter." She moved toward the folder, her movements sharp with barely contained fury. The brochures spilled across the table as she opened it. Glossy photographs of smiling elderly people engaged in crafts, walking manicured grounds, sitting in cheerfully decorated common rooms. Every image felt like a mockery of her current reality. "Look at these people," Claire said, her voice rising. "They look thrilled to have given up their independence, don't they? Delighted to have their children make their decisions for them." "Mom, you're making this harder than it needs to be," Ethan said, finally looking up. The expression in his eyes, equal parts guilt and frustration, felt like another betrayal. "Harder than it needs to be?" Claire stared at her son, this man she'd sacrificed everything to raise, who now sat passively while his wife planned her exile. "The only thing that's hard here is accepting that my own son thinks so little of my judgment that he'd let someone else make decisions about my life without even asking my opinion." The room fell silent except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner, the same clock that had marked time through Ethan's childhood, through late nights of homework help and early mornings of school preparation, through every milestone and setback of their shared life. Claire closed the folder with deliberate finality and placed it back in front of Marissa. "I won't be needing this." "Claire, please?" Marissa started. But Claire was already moving toward the doorway, her dignity intact despite the tremor in her hands. "I think you should leave, both of you." She didn't wait for their response. The sound of her heels against the hardwood floor echoed through the house as she walked away, leaving behind the ruins of what had once been a family dinner and the bitter taste of a trust that might never be repaired. Claire's hands trembled as she poured herself a glass of water, the sound of ice clinking against the glass loud in the silence of the kitchen. Her house, once filled with warmth, now felt foreign. The folder still sat on the dining table, untouched since she had left the room. Its presence was a bruise, deep, purple, and spreading. She took the glass and stepped out onto the back porch. The night was cool, the stars unobscured by city lights. She sat down slowly, the wood of the chair pressing against her spine, and let out a long breath. Beneath the calm of the night sky, the ache behind her ribs sharpened. She couldn't stop thinking about Ethan, his downcast eyes, his silence, the way he'd let Marissa take the lead in something so personal. Had she really raised a man who couldn't speak up for his own mother? Claire thought of the scraped knee Ethan had mentioned. Yes, she'd fallen, but she'd also gotten up, just like she had after her divorce, after losing both her parents, after being passed over for principal at her school despite decades of work. Getting up had become second nature. She refused to believe that getting older meant surrendering the right to decide her own life. The next morning, she slipped on her walking shoes and headed for the park, her usual route winding past tidy lawns and mailboxes with cheerful flags. She needed the movement, the ritual of it. Her body might ache a little more these days, but her legs still worked just fine. The park was quiet except for the distant sound of dogs barking and the occasional jogger. She spotted a familiar figure by the pond. Lily, seated on their favorite bench, sunglasses perched high on her nose like a crown. "Hey, stranger," Lily called, waving with one hand and holding a thermos with the other. Claire offered a tired smile. "Hey, you look like you slept in a pit of tax forms," Lily quipped, patting the Ben. "Drink, talk." Claire took a sip, then sighed. Marissa brought a folder, brochures, said they already paid a deposit. "Oh, hell," Lily muttered. "That woman needs a hobby that doesn't involve power plays." Claire chuckled, but it was hollow. And Ethan just sat there, didn't say a word until I confronted him. Lily's expression softened. He's spineless, not heartless. Probably caught between trying to keep peace and trying not to sleep on the couch. I didn't see it coming. I thought we were having dinner." Lily reached over, squeezed Claire's hand. "You're not crazy, and you're not old enough to be shoved into a rocking chair." Claire stared at the pond. A duck glided across the water, leaving a perfect ripple behind. What if they're right, though? What if I fall again? What if I do need help? You needed help when Ethan was born. Didn't stop you from being a hell of a mother. Claire smiled faintly. I didn't expect to feel so disposable. Like the minute you show a crack, they start measuring you for the shelf. "Welcome to aging in America," Lily said wryly. "They love us as long as we're useful." Claire looked at her friend. "How do you do it? Live alone, handle everything yourself?" "I don't see it as being alone. I see it as being free. No one hovering, no one telling me where to go or how to be." Lily paused, then added, "But I also know when to ask for help. That's the trick." Claire frowned. "You think I'm being stubborn?" "I think you're being proud, which is not the same thing." They sat in silence a moment longer, the late morning sun warming their faces. Claire closed her eyes. "I don't want to be taken care of. I want to be respected." "You deserve that," Lily said simply. Claire nodded slowly, then opened her eyes. "I think I need to make some things very clear to Marissa." Lily grinned. "Now you're talking. Just don't forget, you're not alone, and accepting help doesn't mean you're giving up. Control." Claire stood. Her joints protested, but she ignored them. "I won't go quietly, Lil. If they want a battle over my future, they'll get one." "That's my girl," Lily said, raising her thermos in a mock toast. As Claire made her way back home, a new kind of fire stirred inside her. They'd mistaken her silence for surrender. That was their first mistake. She wasn't done yet. Claire stood in the doorway of her living room, arms crossed, watching the clock tick toward noon. Ethan was due any minute. She'd asked him to come alone. No Marissa, no folder, no lectures. Just him, just her, just the truth. When the doorbell rang, Claire didn't hesitate. She opened the door to find her son standing there, eyes shadowed, with uncertainty, a coffee in each hand like peace offerings. "I got your usual," he said, lifting one cup slightly. She stepped aside without a word. Ethan entered hesitantly, as if afraid the floor might give beneath him. Claire didn't offer a seat. She waited until he turned toward her, then spoke with cool restraint. "Why didn't you warn me?" Ethan winced. "I wanted to. I didn't know how." Claire narrowed her eyes. "You didn't know how? To call your mother and say, 'Hey, Marissa's planning a life-changing ambush over roast beef?'" Ethan sat down at the edge of the sofa, his coffee untouched. "It wasn't supposed to be like that." "But it was, because you let it be." Silence stretched between them. Claire stayed standing, hands folded tightly in front of her, a posture born of years spent asserting herself in classrooms and board meetings. She had never been one to shrink. But this wasn't a room full of strangers. This was her son. "I didn't want you to feel cornered," Ethan said. Claire gave a short, humorless laugh. "Well, that ship has sailed, hasn't it?" "I'm just scared," he admitted. "Ever since the fall, I think about you alone in this house. What if something happens? What if I'm not there?" Claire softened just slightly. "Ethan, I'm not invincible. But I'm not helpless either. I've lived alone for 20 years without incident. One fall doesn't erase that." He looked down, ashamed. "Marissa she's worried too. She sees how hard it is to visit, to keep up with everything. And I guess I let her take the lead." Claire leaned forward. "Why do you always do that?" Ethan looked up. "Let her take the lead, on everything. I raised you to be thoughtful, not passive." "I know," he said quietly. "But she's strong. She makes decisions fast. I keep thinking she means well." "Intentions don't erase impact," Claire snapped. "She came into my home and acted like I was a project to be managed." "I should have stopped her," Ethan whispered. Claire sighed, some of her anger giving way to something deeper: weariness, disappointment, grief. "I needed you to be my son in that moment," she said softly. "Not her mouthpiece." "I'm sorry, Mom." She nodded, then moved to sit across from him. "Do you think I'm becoming a burden?" "No," Ethan said instantly. "But I think you're not always honest about how much you're struggling." Claire flinched at that, then gathered herself. "I'm trying to age with dignity. That doesn't mean I'm trying to hide my reality. It means I want to live it on my terms." Ethan looked genuinely torn. "I'm trying to protect you." "I don't need protection," Claire replied firmly. "I need partnership, respect, communication." They sat in silence again. Then Ethan said something unexpected. "Marissa thinks you're being prideful, that you're refusing care out of spite." Claire's eyes flashed. "Is that what you think too?" "I think." Ethan hesitated. "I think you're scared of what it means to admit you're getting older." Claire stood. "Of course I'm scared. Aging in this world is terrifying. We're treated like fragile relics. We're either patronized or ignored. But that doesn't mean I'm ready to be managed." Ethan nodded slowly, as if something had finally clicked. "What would help then? What does support look like to you?" Claire exhaled. "A conversation, not a folder. A choice, not an ultimatum. You could have started by asking me how I'm feeling instead of deciding how I should live." He rubbed his face. "Okay, you're right." "And Marissa?" Claire asked, folding her arms again. "I'll talk to her," Ethan said, "but you might have to talk to her too. She doesn't. See what she's doing is wrong." "I know," Claire said. "She thinks she's helping, but help without consent is control." Ethan stood, hesitating. "Do you want me to stay? Talk more?" Claire shook her head. "Not today. I need space and time to think." "Oh," looked hurt, but nodded. "Okay, I'll check in later." As the door closed behind him, Claire let out a long breath. The house was silent again, but something had shifted. Not resolved, but acknowledged. For the first time since that disastrous dinner, she felt heard. Now she had to decide what to do with that. Claire stood in front of Lily's door holding a Tupperware container of banana bread. Still warm, still sweet. She wasn't sure why she'd baked it. Habit, maybe. Or maybe she needed to bring something that proved she could still take care of others, even as the world seemed determined to take care of her. Lily opened the door in leggings, a loose sweatshirt, and a face mask dangling from one ear. "You look like someone who needs truth more than tea, but I've got both." Claire held up the banana bread. "I come bearing bribes. Then come in peace." Lily stepped aside. Claire entered the familiar house with its mismatched mugs, overstuffed bookshelves, and faint scent of eucalyptus and old candles. It had always felt lived in, free, unapologetic. Lily poured them both cups of tea. "So, how's the great matriarchal mutiny going?" Claire smirked. "I'm still standing. Ethan came over yesterday." "And?" Claire sipped slowly. "We talked, really talked. He admitted he should have said something, and I told him I wasn't ready to be boxed and labeled." Lily gave a small nod. "Good. You need to say these things, not just feel them." "But it didn't fix anything," Claire added. "He's still caught between me and Marissa, and I can't pretend her intentions didn't come with a power trip." "They usually do," Lily said. "That's the problem with people who think they're helping. They're rarely listening." Claire set her cup down. "Am I being ridiculous? I mean, maybe I'm clinging to something that's already slipping away." Lily raised a brow. "Your mind's intact. Your house is standing. You bake like a goddess and dress better than half the women in town. No, Claire, you're not ridiculous. You're resisting erasure." Claire blinked. The word landed hard. Erasure. That's what it had felt like. The quiet way people stop asking for your opinion. The way they start talking about you instead of to you. Lily leaned forward. "But here's the thing, friend. Independence and help aren't enemies. They don't cancel each other out." Claire looked at her. "You really believe that?" "I live that," Lily said, matter of fact. "I hire someone to clean my gutters, a kid to carry my groceries up the stairs. I'm not giving up control. I'm buying time, energy, autonomy, in a different form." Claire sat back. "So what? Hire a nurse? Let someone come into my home and monitor me?" Lily shrugged. "Maybe. Or maybe you just admit that help doesn't mean surrender. You choose the help. You dictate the terms. That's still power." Claire looked down at her hands. "When did needing anything become so shameful?" "When we were told to be everything for everyone and never ask for more," Lily said. "Especially women like us. We raised kids, ran households, held jobs, and now they want to tuck us away like worn-out sweaters." Claire gave a dry laugh. "You make it sound almost poetic." "It's criminal, not poetic," Lily shot back. "We're not broken. We're just aging. It's not a crime." Claire stared into her tea. "I don't want to be alone, but I don't want to lose myself either." "Then don't." Lily's voice softened. "There's a middle. You just have to carve it." They fell into silence, the kind of silence only old friends could share without awkwardness. Finally, Claire said, "Do you think I should meet with someone from one of those facilities? Not to move, just to talk. See what they offer." "I think," Lily said carefully, "you should gather intel, then use it as leverage. Knowledge is power, even when you're fighting a battle you didn't start." Claire nodded. "I hate that it's come to this." "I hate that they didn't ask first," Lily corrected. Claire stood, setting her cup down. "Thanks for the tea and the clarity." "Anytime. Just remember, you get to choose what the rest of your life looks like. Not them, not a brochure." Outside, Claire paused before unlocking her car. Her breath curled in the air. The chill was sharp, but bracing. She felt clearer, not certain, but steadier. The next step was hers to take. And for the first time since that disastrous dinner, She knew she'd take it on her own terms. Claire didn't bother dressing to impress. She wore what she always wore when she needed to be taken seriously: black slacks, her navy sweater, and the silver locket Ethan had given her years ago, still resting at the base of her throat like a quiet anchor. She'd asked Marissa to meet her at the cafe near downtown, the one with mismatched chairs and too strong coffee. Neutral ground. Marissa arrived precisely on time, her posture crisp, her expression unreadable. She was dressed in a tailored coat, hair pulled back tight, the very picture of efficiency. "I appreciate you meeting me," Claire said, standing only briefly before sitting again. "Of course," Marissa replied, sliding into the seat across from her. "I thought it was important too." Claire studied her for a moment, then went straight to it. "I need to say this plainly. What you did at that dinner, it crossed a line." Marissa's jaw tightened, but she didn't speak. Claire continued, "You didn't ask me what I wanted. You decided for me. You made plans behind my back, and you did it in my home, in front of my son." "I was trying to help," Marissa said, her voice low but controlled. "We've been worried for months. Ethan and I talked about it more than once. After the fall..." Claire held up a hand. "I know why you did it. What I'm saying is that how you did it was wrong." Marissa looked away, eyes flicking to the busy sidewalk outside. "You scared us, Claire. You live alone. You've had dizzy spells, memory lapses." "I'm aware of my own body," Claire cut in, sharper than she intended. "I'm not denying I've slowed down. I'm not pretending I'm 35, but I am still capable of making choices. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story." Marissa inhaled slowly, clearly choosing her next words. "I wasn't trying to control you. I was trying to protect my family. Ethan loses sleep over you. I thought if we took the first step, we could relieve that burden. Make it easier for everyone." Claire's hands rested flat on the table. "Did it ever occur to you that I lose sleep too? That watching my son shrink between us while you plan my future is its own kind of burden?" Marissa's eyes returned to hers. For the first time, the confidence flickered. "You think I'm trying to push you out?" Claire didn't answer right away. She softened her voice. "I think you see me as a problem to solve." Silence fell between them. Then, Claire pulled a folded paper from her purse and slid it across the table. "What's this?" Marissa asked. "My decision. A compromise." Marissa unfolded it, her eyes scanned quickly. "In-home care?" Claire nodded. "I've already spoken to a coordinator, Grace. She'll help me interview professionals. I'll have someone come twice a week, light housekeeping, check-ins, that kind of thing." Marissa blinked. "But you're staying in your home." "Yes, with the support I choose on the schedule I agree to. That's the part everyone forgot. I still get to decide." Marissa looked like she might argue, but then she sighed. "You really don't want to move, do you?" Claire met her gaze without flinching. "Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I'm not closing the door. I just won't be shoved through it." Marissa's expression softened in small, cautious increments. "You're right," she said finally. "We handled it poorly." Claire's brows lifted, surprised. "That's the first time you've said that." "It's the first time I let myself consider that I might have been wrong." Claire leaned back slightly. "Thank you for saying it." Marissa folded the paper again, setting it beside her coffee. "If you ever change your mind about the facility, Sunset Manor, we'll support you." "I know," Claire said. "And if I ever need more help than I can manage, I'll say so." They sat for a moment in mutual quiet, two women bound not by affection, but by the man they both loved, and the future they both feared in different ways. "I want you to be safe," Marissa said at last. "I want to be free," Claire replied. Maybe those things didn't have to be opposites. When they rose to leave, Marissa extended her hand. Claire took it, not out of warmth, not yet, but as a signal. A truce had been reached. Not resolution, not closeness, but an acknowledgement. One step, Claire thought. Her future wasn't something to be handed to her. It would be carved, choice by choice, in her own steady hand. Claire waited until late afternoon to call Ethan. She needed the day to herself after her meeting with Marissa. Time to sit in the stillness of her home, surrounded by familiar photos and creaking floorboards that spoke of a life built, not assigned. When she finally dialed, Ethan answered on the second ring. "Hey, Mom. We need to talk." A pause. "Okay. Should I come by?" "No," Claire said firmly. "I'll meet you at the lake trail. Half an hour." It was their old walking route. When Ethan was a boy, he'd race ahead while she carried snacks in a thermos. Today, she carried nothing but a deep, slow breath. They met at the trailhead, under a sky streaked with late-day gold. Ethan looked tired, older than he had days ago. Guilt ages a person, Claire thought. "I talked to Marissa," she said once they'd begun walking. "I figured," Ethan replied. "She texted me, said, 'You were calm.'" Claire smirked slightly. "Well, I didn't throw the brochures at her, if that's what she meant." Ethan gave a half-hearted chuckle, then turned serious. "Did anything change?" "I gave her a paper with my decision. In-home care, twice a week. I get to choose who, when, and how." He stopped walking. "So you're staying?" "I'm staying," Claire confirmed. "For now." He rubbed the back of his neck. "You didn't tell me before meeting her." Claire turned to face him. "Because I needed to decide for myself, without the two of you circling me like I'm incapable of thought." Ethan flushed. "I wasn't trying to circle you. You let her speak for both of you, Ethan. You let her carry decisions that should have come from conversation, not strategy." "I know," he said quietly. "But do you know what it's like to worry about you every day and feel helpless?" "I've spent my entire life worrying about you and being helpless," Claire replied. "When you had the flu at 4, when you didn't get into your first college pick, when you called me at midnight the night you thought Marissa would leave, I stayed up every night praying you'd find your footing. And you did. But I never once thought my worry gave me the right to run your life." Ethan looked away, shame softening his features. Claire's voice broke just slightly. "Now the tables have turned, and you think worry is a reason to override my voice." "I didn't mean to hurt you." "But you did," she said. "And now I have to live with the truth that my own son doesn't trust me to make decisions." "I do trust you," he insisted, stepping closer. I got scared. I didn't want something to happen and have to live with knowing I could have done more." "Then be present," Claire said. "Not controlling. Be available, not managerial." "I can try." They resumed walking, the silence heavier now, but more honest. Claire paused again near a bench by the water. "I'm not the same woman I was 20 years ago. I get tired faster. I forget names. I fall asleep in the middle of books. But I'm still me." "I know," he said softly. "And I'm scared too," she admitted, barely above a whisper. "Not of death, of disappearing, of becoming invisible while still alive." Ethan sat beside her. "You're not invisible, Mom." "Sometimes it feels like I'm a task on someone's checklist." His voice cracked. "That's not what I wanted." Claire reached for his hand. "Then let's not let this fracture grow." He nodded, squeezing her fingers. "I'll talk to Marissa. Really talk. We'll support whatever you decide." "I hope so," Claire said, then added with a touch of wryness. "But if she shows up with another folder, I won't be responsible for what I throw at her." Ethan laughed, Real laughter this time, the kind that didn't carry apology. They sat until the sun dipped low, casting shadows across the lake. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. The next morning, Claire stood in front of the sleek glass doors of the Briarwood Wellness Center, gripping her tote bag a little tighter than necessary. It wasn't a senior living facility, at least not officially. The center offered consultations for various elder care services, including in-home support. It was, Grace had told her on the phone, a bridge between independence and assistance. Claire wasn't sure she liked that phrasing. Bridges, after all, suggested crossing over to something else. She wasn't ready to leave anything behind. Inside, the lobby was modern and understated. Warm lighting, soft neutral tones, potted succulents on every surface. It was quiet, but not sterile. Peaceful, even. Still, Claire's spine was rigid as she approached the front desk. The receptionist greeted her with a smile. "Ms. Mitchell, Grace will be right with you." Claire nodded and sat in a chair near the window. She noticed the other woman in the waiting area, probably late 70s, well-dressed, scrolling on a tablet. She didn't look fragile. She looked in control. That gave Claire a small comfort. "Claire?" A soft voice. She turned to see Grace, a tall, elegant woman in her early 40s, dressed in slacks and a soft blue blouse, clipboard in hand, and eyes that registered everything. "Nice to meet you in person," Grace said warmly. "Shall we?" Claire followed her into a private consultation room. It felt more like a therapist's office than a medical one. Bookshelves, comfortable chairs, a tea set already prepared. Claire didn't sit right away. "I'll be honest," she said. "I'm not here to be convinced of anything." Grace smiled without offense. "Good, because I'm not here to convince. I'm here to listen and give options." That disarmed Claire slightly. She sat. "So," Grace began, "tell me what brought you in." Claire hesitated, then answered, honestly. "My daughter-in-law thinks I'm no longer fit to live alone. My son agrees but lacks the spine to say so out loud. They blindsided me with brochures for senior facilities over dinner." Grace's lips twitched with sympathy. That must have been jarring. "I threw them out," Claire said. "But I also realized they're not completely wrong. I don't feel old, but things have changed. And if I want to stay in my home, I might have to accept that help isn't defeat." "That's a wise and very rare perspective," Grace said. "Most people come to that after a crisis. You're coming before one." Claire folded her hands in her lap. "I want to maintain control. I want to choose who comes into my house. I want boundaries. But I also don't want to burden my son, even if part of me thinks he owes me more than this." Grace nodded. "Let me walk you through what's possible. We offer customized in-home support, companionship visits, light meal prep, transportation help, medication reminders. Some people use us for 2 hours a week, others 12. It scales with your needs." Claire listened carefully. "And the people who provide the care?" "Thoroughly vetted. Background checks, references, compatibility interviews. You'll meet and approve anyone before they ever show up at your door." Claire leaned forward slightly. "What if I don't want a nurse with a clipboard and a forced smile?" "Then you won't get one," Grace replied easily. "You get someone who understands they're there to support, not supervise." Claire exhaled. "I might be open to 2 days a week. No overnights, no medical stuff, just a second set of eyes." "Completely doable," Grace said. "We also offer monthly wellness checks if you'd like someone to monitor trends, energy, appetite, safety risks, without being invasive." Claire nodded slowly. "And if I hate it?" "You cancel, no penalty. You're in charge." Those last words, "you're in charge," landed with surprising weight. Claire felt something loosen in her chest. Grace offered her a slim packet, not a folder, not a brochure, just a sheet with names, contact times, and a gentle breakdown of what a trial schedule might look like. "I'm not promising anything yet," Claire said, slipping the paper into her bag. "I wouldn't ask you to," Grace replied. Claire stood. "Thank you for not treating me like a problem." "You're a person navigating a transition," Grace said with quiet authority. "And you're doing it on your terms. That's exactly how it should be." Outside, the late morning sun had warmed the sidewalk. Claire walked slowly to her car, her heels clicking with confidence she hadn't felt in weeks. She sat behind the wheel and let the silence settle. No one had pushed her. No one had spoken over her. And now, she had something she hadn't had since that disastrous dinner, a plan that was hers alone. Driving home, she passed the turnoff for Sunset Manor and didn't even glance at it. That wasn't her path. Her path was quieter, slower, but hers. Later that evening, Claire sat at her kitchen table sipping tea. She pulled out the sheet from her bag and began circling names. She wasn't sure yet which option she'd choose, but she knew this. Whatever came next, she would meet it with open eyes, a steady voice, and both hands on the wheel. The next day, Claire stood by the living room window, phone in hand, her thumb hovering over the call button beside a name she'd circled. Naomi Reed, late 50s, former nurse, now a part-time caregiver. Grace had described her as grounded, intuitive, someone who understands boundaries without being cold. That had appealed to Claire. She didn't want pity. She didn't need cheerleading. She needed competence wrapped in dignity. She pressed call. The voice that answered was warm and calm. "Hello, Naomi Reed speaking." "Hi, this is Claire Mitchell. Grace at Briarwood gave me your name. She said you might be available for part-time home support." A brief pause, then a smile in the voice. "Yes, absolutely. Would you like to talk about what you're looking for?" They spoke for 15 minutes. Claire laid out her expectations. Clearly, 2 days a week, late mornings, assistance with minor things like organizing medications, light errands, maybe walking to the park if the weather allowed. She made one thing clear: she was not to be hovered over. Naomi responded without hesitation. "I believe in supporting people without stepping on their lives, Ms. Mitchell. My role is to add steadiness where it's welcome, not to take over." Claire liked that. They agreed to a trial run the following Tuesday at 10 a.m. After hanging up, Claire stood still for a long moment. The air in her home felt subtly different, anticipatory, not oppressive. She wasn't being put somewhere. She was adding something, on her own terms. That distinction made all the difference. That evening, Ethan called. "Hey, Mom, Marissa told me about your plan." Claire leaned back in her armchair. "Is that a good thing or a warning?" "No, actually, I think it's good." He sounded tentative. "She said you were calm, decisive, that you met with Grace and already found someone." "I did," Claire said. "Her name's Naomi. We're starting with a trial." There was a pause. "Mom, I'm proud of you." Claire blinked, surprised by the lump rising in her throat. "Proud? Yeah, I know this hasn't been easy, and I know I didn't help at the start." "No, you didn't," Claire said gently. "But I'm glad you see it now." "I do, and I want to make sure I stay in the loop without making you feel boxed in." "That," Claire said, smiling slightly, "would be a welcome change." Ethan chuckled. "We could come by this weekend. No brochures, no surprise interventions. Maybe just lunch and normal conversation," Claire said. "That would be lovely." They hung up with a mutual promise to try again. No pressure, no hidden motives. When Tuesday came, Claire was dressed and ready before 9:30. She paced the living room, tidied an already tidy kitchen, and fluffed cushions twice. She told herself it wasn't nerves. It was preparation, control, presentation. At exactly 9:58, the doorbell rang. Naomi stood on the porch in a navy cardigan and simple jeans, her silver-streaked hair pulled back. Her eyes were clear and kind, but not probing. "Good morning, Ms. Mitchell." Claire opened the door and gestured inside. "Come in, Naomi, and please, call me Claire." They sat in the kitchen, talked over tea. Claire explained her routines, her expectations, her fears. Naomi listened without interruption. No clipboard, no overly cheerful affirmations. Just presence. Real presence. As the hours passed, Naomi helped reorganize Claire's medicine cabinet, assisted with setting reminders on her phone, and even accompanied her for a walk around the block. They talked about books, about music, about nothing and everything. When Naomi left, Claire watched her go from the front step, a strange lightness blooming in her chest. It wasn't just that Naomi had been helpful. It was that, for the first time since this all began, Claire didn't feel managed. She felt supported. And that, she realized as she stepped back into her quiet home, was a foundation she could build on. Claire stood in front of the mirror, brushing the last few strands of her silver-streaked hair behind her ears. She didn't know why she was so nervous. This wasn't a courtroom. It wasn't a school assembly or a parent-teacher conference. But it felt like all of them at once. Today, she would lay out her decision to Ethan and Marissa. Not ask, not plead, just present. The call had already been made. Lunch was set for 1. Ethan offered to bring takeout from their favorite Italian spot downtown, the one they used to go to on report card days. Claire accepted, mostly because it left her one less thing to manage. She needed her focus elsewhere. Naomi had just left after her second full visit, and everything had gone smoothly. She was efficient, but not overbearing. When Claire forgot the name of her blood pressure meds, Naomi didn't raise an eyebrow. She just smiled, waited, and said, "We'll find it together." It was that kind of support Claire had needed all along. A companion in the gaps, not a foreman barking instructions. The doorbell rang at exactly 1. Claire opened the door and tried to gauge Ethan's expression. He looked wary. Marissa stood behind him holding a brown paper bag, her smile brittle and too wide. Claire didn't invite them in right away. She stepped aside and said, "Let's eat first." They settled around the dining table. No china this time, no daisies. Just plates, napkins, and the tension that had begun to live in the space between them. Over bites of chicken marsala and roasted vegetables, Claire kept the conversation light. She asked Ethan about work, Marissa about her niece's dance recital. She let them think for a while that maybe this was just a lunch to clear the air. Then she stood. "I have something to say, and I'd appreciate it if you let me get through it before jumping in." They nodded. Marissa sat back, wary. Ethan's fork hovered above his plate. Claire placed a folded sheet of paper on the table. "This is my decision. I've chosen to stay in my home. But I've also arranged for help. My way." She outlined her arrangement with Naomi. 2 days a week, no overnight visits, weekly check-ins with Grace, and quarterly assessments of whether more care would be needed. She'd even gone as far as installing a discreet emergency alert button. In the bathroom, her own idea. Ethan exhaled slowly. "That's thorough." Claire nodded. "Because I took it seriously. Because I'm taking all of this seriously. My independence, my health, your concerns. But I refuse to be stripped of my agency because you're anxious." Marissa leaned forward. "Claire, I respect that. I do. But what happens if things change faster than expected?" "Then we change the plan," Claire said. "Together, but not before. Not behind my back. Not with folders at the dinner table." Marissa flushed. Slightly, but nodded. "I didn't mean to ambush you. I really thought I was doing the right thing." "I know you did," Claire said. "And I'm willing to let that go, if you're willing to let me steer my own life." Ethan cleared his throat. "I think this is Fair. Actually, I think it's really smart. You've covered every angle. Claire's posture relaxed for the first time that afternoon. That's all I wanted, for someone to acknowledge that I am capable of thinking things through. They sat in silence for a while, the only sounds the gentle clink of forks against porcelain. Finally, Marissa spoke again. Would you let me meet Naomi? Just so I know who's coming in? Claire hesitated. Eventually, when I'm ready. Let me have this space for now. Marissa nodded. Okay. After lunch, they moved to the living room. Ethan asked to see the alert button, and Claire demonstrated its small, unassuming design. He seemed impressed. Claire didn't gloat. She didn't say, "See? I can take care of myself." She didn't have to. Her actions had already said it all. When they finally stood to leave, Marissa reached out and touched Claire's arm. Thank you for hearing us, even if we didn't say it the right way. Claire smiled, the edges soft but guarded. Thank you for finally hearing me. After they were gone, Claire sat in her quiet home and let the silence wash over her like rain on dry ground. She wasn't triumphant. She wasn't angry. She was steady. And that was everything. After Ethan and Marissa left, Claire lingered in the living room, staring at the now empty tea tray. Her fingertips traced the delicate rim of the cup she hadn't finished. The conversation had gone better than she expected, but not without scars. Even compromise leaves marks. She rose, walked over to the bookshelf, and pulled down an old photo album. The cover was cracked, the leather softened from years of handling. She opened it to a page she hadn't looked at in ages. Ethan, 7 years old, missing his front teeth, holding a Mother's Day card made from construction paper and glitter. She remembered that day. He had burned the toast and spilled orange juice, but he had tried, really tried, to do something kind all by himself. That's the version of Ethan she had to remember, not the one who had stayed quiet while his wife led the ambush. Not the one who had looked at her like a problem. But the boy who had cried when she broke her ankle and stayed up all night to keep her company, telling her knock-knock jokes to distract her from the pain. Claire closed the album and took it with her to the armchair, holding it in her lap like a shield. The word compromise kept echoing in her mind. She had always thought of it as something you do when you lose. When you give up part of yourself to make someone else comfortable. But maybe that wasn't the only definition. Maybe, when done right, it was about drawing a line and inviting others to meet you there. She flipped the page. Another photo. Ethan's high school graduation. Her face looked younger then, but the pride in her eyes was the same. He had been the first in their family to go to college. She remembered standing beside him, feeling the weight of all the sacrifices, all the lonely nights and double shifts, melting in that single moment. Claire ran her fingers down the edge of the photo. She didn't want to be the woman who refused to change. But neither did she want to vanish quietly into someone else's plan. Today's meeting had been about finding a voice again and using it. The phone rang, jarring her. It was Lily. Well? Her friend asked without preamble. Did they try to fight you? Claire smiled into the receiver. No, I think they finally listened. Lily exhaled dramatically. Thank God. If Marissa had brought another brochure, I would have marched over there and shredded it. They laughed. It felt good to laugh. Claire told her about Naomi, about the alert button, about the look on Ethan's face when he realized she'd done all the thinking they thought she couldn't do. You've got more strategy in your little finger than both of them combined, Lily said. It's not about winning. Of course not, Lily replied. It's about being seen. And you were. After they hung up, Claire went into the guest room and opened the closet. Inside were the boxes she hadn't touched since retiring. Lesson plans, class photos, notes from students. She pulled one out. 3rd grade, Ms. Mitchell's reading group. A card tucked inside read, "Thank you for letting me be smart in my own way." Claire smiled. That had always been her strength as a teacher, meeting children where they were, not forcing them into a mold. Now she was asking the same from her own family. And that, she thought as she returned to the living room, was progress. The following Thursday, Naomi arrived with a tote bag and a soft knock. Claire opened the door with a nod, already feeling more at ease with this new rhythm. "Morning, Claire. I brought some ginger tea. I remember you mentioned it helped with the nausea you sometimes get." Claire blinked. It was a small thing, but the fact that Naomi remembered, without being asked, warmed something old and stiff in her chest. They sat together in the kitchen. Naomi moved quietly, efficient as ever, rinsing a few dishes in the sink before turning to refill the pill organizer on the counter. Claire sat across from her, watching, not supervising, just observing. "Do you like this work?" Claire asked suddenly. Naomi looked up. "I do. I worked in a hospital for years, but I never liked the rush. People became checklists. Now I get to slow down, know people, not just their meds or their file number." Claire nodded. "I spent my whole career being rushed. Teaching felt that way too sometimes. Like I had to constantly prove my worth, meet metrics." Naomi finished sorting the last of the vitamins and sat down. "Do you miss it?" "Some days, others. I'm grateful it's behind me." They fell into comfortable silence. Later that afternoon, Claire walked Naomi to the door. As she stepped back inside, she noticed something on the side table, a small envelope with Marissa's handwriting. She must have dropped it off during her lunch break. Claire opened it carefully. Inside was a card. The front read, "Thank you." The inside, in Marissa's careful script, "Claire, I've realized I didn't know how to let you speak for yourself. I thought I was helping. Maybe I was also trying to control what scared me. Thank you for showing me a better way. Marissa." Claire sat with the card for a long while. She wasn't ready to call it forgiveness, but it was something close. A bridge, built with smaller steps than before, and stronger for it. That evening, Claire sat on her porch as the sky faded from pink to slate. In the distance, wind chimes danced. She wrapped a shawl around her shoulders and thought of her mother, who had died too young to face the aging battles Claire now fought. What advice would she have given? Probably none. She'd been proud too. But maybe proud women needed new traditions, like admitting fear, like asking for help without surrendering dignity. Claire closed her eyes. She saw herself not as a woman being pushed out of her home, but as someone slowly redefining what home meant. It wasn't just walls and routines. It was choice. It was voice. And at last, she had both again. Saturday evening came with the hum of cicadas and the comforting clink of cutlery as Claire set the table. It wasn't formal, just her pale blue ceramic plates, linen napkins, and the scent of rosemary chicken drifting through the air. Ethan and Marissa were due any minute. She wasn't trying to prove anything. She just wanted to share a table. Again, this time without tension gripping the corners. They arrived right on time. Ethan carried a bottle of wine, and Marissa brought a lemon tart in a glass dish wrapped with a cooling cloth. Claire smiled as she accepted both, and for once, it didn't feel performative. It felt like a gesture of peace. Dinner was light. They talked about Naomi, about Claire's walking routes, even about Ethan's odd new fascination with growing tomatoes in containers. Laughter came more easily. The wounds between them weren't gone, but they were bandaged, cleaned. At one point, Marissa looked up from her glass. "I've been reading about aging in place," she said. "There's a lot I didn't understand. It's humbling." Claire met her gaze. "It's humbling for all of us. I'm still learning too." The words weren't loaded. They were honest. After dessert, when the dishes were cleared, Ethan lingered in the kitchen while Marissa stepped out to take a call. He leaned against the counter, wine glass in hand. Mom, he said quietly, I keep thinking about how fast I let things snowball. You deserved better. Claire reached for his hand and squeezed. You're here now. That's what matters. He nodded, eyes damp but steady. I don't think I ever realized how much I still see you as, well, unshakable. Like nothing could touch you. That's the illusion I built, Claire replied softly. But illusions don't last forever. Later that night, Naomi texted Claire to confirm Tuesday's visit. Claire replied simply, looking forward to it. Bring your tea. I'll bring the stories. That message lingered in her mind as she settled into bed. But sleep didn't come immediately. Instead, Claire reached for the notebook on her nightstand, the one she hadn't touched since retiring. She opened to a blank page and began to write. June 10th. Today, I reclaimed something I thought I'd lost, the right to shape my own story. It's strange how easily that slips away, quietly, over time, until one day your voice echoes back to you like someone else's. But not anymore. I am not a burden. I am not done growing. I am not an emergency waiting to happen. I am a woman standing firmly in her life, even as it changes. She closed the notebook, her fingers resting on the soft cover. Then, for the first time in weeks, Claire slept through the night. Outside, the wind moved gently through the trees. And inside, a woman who had once feared vanishing into silence now knew her voice had never left. It had just been waiting for her to use it again. Claire stood at her front window on a quiet Tuesday morning, watching the neighborhood slowly come to life. The mail truck rumbled down the street. Kids in backpacks trudged toward the school bus stop, and across the road, her neighbor's dog barked at a squirrel with a kind of joyful urgency Claire envied. This was her new rhythm now, not rushed, not idle, measured, balanced. There was a structure to her days, one built gently around Naomi's visits and the quiet satisfaction of reclaiming little rituals she'd forgotten to notice in the chaos of teaching and parenting. At exactly 9:58, Naomi arrived, just as she always did. She rang the bell, then let herself in with the key Claire had, hesitantly but deliberately, given her the week before. "Morning, Claire," Naomi said, slipping off her shoes and setting a small brown paper bag on the counter. "I brought fresh bread from that bakery you mentioned last time." Claire smiled. "You spoil me." "No," Naomi replied. "You're just finally letting someone do what you used to do for everyone else." They spent the morning baking together, Naomi's idea. Claire hadn't baked cinnamon rolls from scratch in over a decade, but her hands remembered. The dough, the sugar, the scent of rising yeast. It pulled her backward and forward all at once. They talked about everything: childhood memories, books, small fears, large ones. Naomi listened more than she spoke, asked questions that lingered. Long after they were asked, after the rolls were in the oven, Claire leaned against the counter, watching Naomi wipe flour from her hands. "Do you ever get tired of people assuming you're here just to manage them?" Naomi looked up, surprised. Then she smiled. "Yes. But I also get to prove them wrong. Every time I show up and stay present without trying to take over." Claire nodded slowly. "I think that's why I trust you." Naomi didn't respond. She didn't need to. By early afternoon, the house smelled of cinnamon and butter, and Claire felt something she hadn't in months, hopeful. Not because anything had dramatically changed, but because she no longer felt like she was waiting for her life to be redefined by someone else. That evening, she sat on the porch with a cup of tea and a fresh notebook. This one wasn't for fears or plans. This one was for stories, memories, recipes, words she hadn't made space for until now. She titled the first page simply, "Beginnings." On Friday afternoon, Ethan stopped by alone for the first time in weeks. No Marissa, No clipboard energy. Just him, holding a small potted plant. Lavender, Claire noticed immediately. I know you already have one out back, he said sheepishly, as she opened the door. But this one's supposed to be heat-resistant. Claire smiled and took the plant. Then it's perfect. Come in. They sat in the sunroom, the one Ethan had helped insulate during college break. Claire served iced tea with lemon, and they talked. Really talked. About his work. About how exhausted he felt lately. About the way the world seemed to demand more and offer less in return. I've been thinking about you a lot, Ethan said, breaking a quiet moment. About what it means to trust someone's independence while still caring for them. Claire tilted her head. That's a fine line. I haven't walked it well, he admitted. But I want to try. She nodded. Trying counts, especially when you say it out loud. He looked down at his tea. When I was a kid, I thought you were invincible. Claire chuckled. I let you think that. I know, and it worked. But now I see you're human. Still sharp, still fierce, but human. And that scares me more than I thought it would. Claire's voice softened. Being seen clearly can be scary. But it also means I'm still here, Ethan. You don't have to mourn something that hasn't happened yet. They talked for over an hour. When he left, he hugged her tightly. No guilt, no performance. Just warmth. After he drove away, Claire planted the lavender near the garden bench out back. She took her time pressing the soil around its base. When she stood up, she felt the ache in her knees. But it didn't diminish the sense of accomplishment. Instead, it reminded her, this body, this life, still had plenty to give. The following week brought a sudden test of Claire's composure. On a breezy Wednesday afternoon, while Naomi was tidying the upstairs linen closet, Claire decided to water the front hedges. It was something she hadn't done in weeks. Naomi usually took care of it now, but the air felt light, and her limbs wanted movement. The sun was just right, warm but not cruel. She was halfway down the front walk when she heard a loud crash from the street, a metallic thud followed by a sharp, panicked scream. Claire turned quickly. Across the road, a neighbor's teenage son had overturned his bike. The boy, Landon, was tangled beneath it, gripping his knee and crying out. Without thinking, Claire moved. Her watering can dropped with a thud onto the grass as she crossed the street, calling his name. Her legs weren't fast, but they were steady. Naomi appeared moments later, having heard the commotion. I've got first aid in the car, Naomi said, already jogging toward them. Claire crouched beside Landon, brushing the hair from his flushed forehead. It's okay, sweetheart. Help's coming. The boy's breathing slowed under her calm voice. Naomi returned swiftly, applying antiseptic and gauze with practiced care. Landon's mother, Julie, burst out of the house moments later, panic blooming across her face. She froze at the sight. Claire crouched protectively over her son, Naomi giving clear, calm instructions. Claire stood slowly as Julie reached them. Her knees screamed. Naomi reached out discreetly, steadying her just enough. I'm okay, Claire whispered. Let me do this. Julie hugged her boy tightly, then turned to Claire. Thank you, I didn't even hear him fall. Claire nodded. He'll be fine, just a scare. Later, as Naomi helped her back to the porch, Claire finally sat, heart still thudding. Naomi placed a glass of water in her hand. You handled that like a pro, she said. Claire gave a soft laugh. Didn't feel like one. You didn't freeze, you moved, you showed up, that's everything. Claire looked out at the now quiet street. For a moment, she allowed the exhaustion to settle on her shoulders. Then she set it down. I'm not made of glass, she said. No, Naomi agreed. You're made of roots. That Saturday, Claire invited Lily over for tea. It had become a quiet ritual again, just like it used to be before things got complicated. They sat on the back porch, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the yard. The lavender Ethan had brought swayed in the breeze, already blooming. Claire poured the tea. Lily brought scones from the co-op, but neither touched the food for a long while. Do you ever feel like the world is gently pushing you out of the frame? Claire asked. Lily stirred her tea with slow circles. Every time I'm in line at the pharmacy and someone calls me dear. They both chuckled, but the sound didn't quite reach their eyes. Claire leaned back in her chair. Sometimes, I feel like I'm living in a house made of memories. The world outside keeps building new things, new lives, and I'm just here. Lily nodded. And yet somehow we're still needed, in ways they don't always see. Claire looked toward the garden. Ethan sees it now, but it took all this to get there. He's lucky you didn't give up on him. I almost did, Claire admitted. I was so angry, Lily. Not just at him, at the whole damn idea of what we're supposed to become when we get old. Quiet, accepting, grateful for what crumbs of control they let us keep. Claire glanced sideways. That bitterness, do you carry it too? Lily shrugged. I carry it like an heirloom, but I'm trying to trade it in for something lighter. Claire smiled at that. I like that. They sat in silence again, the kind between two people who no longer need to fill space with words. I've started writing again, Claire said eventually. Not emails or lists, just thoughts, stories, things I never made time for. Lily raised an eyebrow. You're building your second chapter. Claire shook her head. Third, maybe even fourth. Lily reached across the table and touched her hand. Whatever number it is, Claire, you're still writing it. And that's more than most people get. As the sun dipped lower, painting the sky in hues of brass and rose, Claire realized something. She was no longer afraid of time. She had stepped into it, claimed it, and she wasn't going anywhere. The next week, Claire found herself parked in front of her old elementary school. It wasn't planned. She had been running errands nearby, and on impulse, turned down the tree-lined street that led to Fairview Elementary. The building hadn't changed much. Same red brick exterior, same faded sign by the front doors. The flag waved lazily in the breeze. Children's laughter echoed from the playground out back. Claire sat in the car for several minutes, watching the movement through the front windows. Teachers she didn't recognize now occupied her old halls. She wondered who used her former classroom. Did they keep the corkboard by the reading nook, the alphabet rug, the bookshelf with the loose-legged table beside it? Without fully thinking it through, Claire stepped out and walked toward the doors. She signed in at the front office, her name instantly recognized by the receptionist, an old parent volunteer from years past. Moments later, the principal, young, kind-eyed, clearly new, greeted her. Ms. Mitchell, he said warmly, shaking her hand. You're a legend here. Claire awoke to the sound of birdsong threading softly through the open window. For once, there was no heaviness in her chest. The morning sunlight stretched across the bedspread in golden bands, warm and forgiving. She stretched slowly, savoring the small ache in her joints, not as a burden, but as a reminder that her body still carried her. It had been 3 weeks since she implemented the caregiving plan, and life had begun to find a gentler rhythm. Naomi's visits had become an anchor, predictable, calm, never invasive. Tuesdays were for errands and checking in, Fridays for longer walks or tea on the porch. They had developed an easy rapport, one built not just on practicality, but trust. This morning was a Friday. Claire moved slowly through her routine. Warm water, a splash of lemon, a few light stretches by the back door where the sunlight poured in brightest. The garden was blooming early this year, yellow marigolds, a few scattered violets, the mint patch growing wild. She pulled open the kitchen drawer where Naomi had neatly organized her medications, smiling faintly. For someone who had resisted outside help so stubbornly, she was now oddly grateful for it. When Naomi arrived just after 10, she came with a tin of scones and a new book of poetry under one arm. "I thought you might like this," she said, handing Claire the collection. "Ada Limon. Her work reminds me of you, sharp but generous." Claire laughed. "Sharp and generous? I'll take it." They sat in the sunroom sipping tea while Naomi read a poem aloud, her voice steady and low. Claire listened, eyes closed, absorbing the language like rain after drought. Later, Naomi walked with her to the park at the end of the block. They moved slowly, comfortably. A few neighbors waved. Claire waved back. For the first time in months, she didn't feel like someone people whispered about. At the park, she sat on the familiar bench near the fountain. Naomi excused herself to take a short walk around the loop, giving Claire space. Claire watched the wind ripple through the maple trees, their leaves just beginning to turn. She let her thoughts drift, not toward fear or resistance, but toward possibility. She didn't want to just maintain anymore. She wanted to grow, even now. And maybe, just maybe, that growth could start with connection. She reached into her bag and pulled out her phone. "Hi, Lily," she said when the call connected. "I was wondering if you're free for lunch next week. I have something I want to talk to you about. Something new." Lily arrived at the cafe 5 minutes late, her scarf twisted sideways and her sunglasses pushed up like a headband. "Traffic," she announced, sliding into the booth. "And some fool decided to make a 3-point turn in the middle of Elm." Claire chuckled. "I've missed you." Lily studied her for a moment, lips pursed in mock scrutiny. "You look different. Better?" Settled. Claire took a sip of her tea. "I've been thinking about starting something. Like a midlife crisis, or are we talking pottery?" "A community group," Claire said. "For women our age. Nothing dramatic, just a monthly gathering. Talk, tea, stories, a way to stay visible." Lily blinked, then grinned. "Claire Mitchell, grassroots activist." Claire laughed. "I just feel like we're all being slowly erased, and I don't want to vanish quietly." Lily nodded, growing serious. "Count me in. And I know 2 others who'd love that. Gloria Sanders, remember her? And May Lee. Both retired, both bored out of their skulls." They agreed to meet the following Thursday at Claire's house. The first gathering was small but spirited. 4 women, 2 bottles of wine, and hours of laughter and shared aches. They talked about grandkids and knee pain, about books and things they wished someone had told them about getting older. By the 3rd meeting, they had a name, the Still Here Circle. Claire felt something loosen in her chest after each session. She was no longer just reacting to life, she was shaping it. Naomi noticed the change too. "You're glowing," she remarked one morning as she handed Claire a grocery list they'd prepared together. "I'm plotting my return to social." "Dominance," Claire deadpanned. Naomi laughed. "I believe it." That afternoon, as they shelled peas together at the kitchen table, Naomi paused. "Can I tell you something?" Claire looked up. "Of course." "My mother passed last year. She had Alzheimer's. I was her caregiver for 6 years." Claire's hands stilled. "Naomi?" "I didn't know." Naomi nodded. "Most people don't. I didn't talk about it much. But being here with you, it's healing in a way. You remind me that care doesn't have to mean loss of self. It can mean clarity, too." Claire reached out and squeezed her hand. "Thank you for telling me." That night, Claire lit a candle for Naomi's mother. Quietly, privately, no announcements. Just honor. 2 weeks later, Ethan and Marissa arrived for brunch. There was no awkwardness. No tiptoeing, just clinking forks and stories about Ethan's failed attempt at sourdough bread. After the dishes were cleared, Marissa lingered. "I heard about your group," she said. "The Still Here Circle?" Claire arched a brow. "Word travels." Marissa looked sheepish. "Ethan told me. I think it's amazing. Actually, I was wondering if you'd be interested in doing something similar at the community center. We've been trying to expand our senior outreach." Claire blinked. "You want me to lead something?" Marissa nodded. "You'd be perfect." Claire hesitated. The word senior still made her flinch, but the invitation felt real. It felt earned. "I'll think about it," she said, and she meant it. The fourth Still Here circle was the largest yet. 8 women, 1 crockpot of lentil soup, and enough chatter to drown out the ticking of Claire's antique wall clock. They sat in a loose circle in Claire's living room, chairs borrowed from neighbors and folding stools from the garage. Today's topic, suggested by Lily, was what we weren't told. The answers came freely. That you'd feel invisible in the grocery store by 50. That doctors would start talking to your adult children instead of you. That grief doesn't follow a schedule. Claire listened, nodded, then shared her own. That you could be both afraid and strong at the same time. And that one doesn't cancel out the other. There was a stillness after she spoke, a silence of recognition. As the women left that afternoon, hugging, promising to meet again, Claire felt a joy that was quiet and rooted. Not loud, not fleeting, just solid. But the next morning, she woke with a stabbing pain in her lower back that left her breathless. She gripped the bed frame until the wave passed, then sat for several minutes, willing herself to breathe deeply. Naomi arrived not long after and immediately noticed. "You're pale," she said. "What happened?" Claire explained, brushing it off. "I slept funny, that's all." Naomi didn't argue. She simply brewed peppermint tea and suggested they cancel errands for the day. They sat in the sunroom, quiet. Eventually, Claire whispered, "I hate that a twinge of pain can unravel me now." Naomi looked at her gently. "It's not unraveling, it's listening." Later, after Naomi left, Claire lay on the couch, a hot water bottle on her back, and stared at the ceiling fan. She wasn't afraid, not the way she had been before. But she was alert. Her body was no longer a guarantee. But it wasn't her enemy either. That evening, Ethan came by with a bag of groceries and a determined expression. "Thought I'd stock your fridge," he said. Claire smiled. "What's the occasion?" "No occasion," he said. "Just checking in." They unpacked the bag together. Ethan moved slower than usual, his glances lingering on her face as if memorizing it. Finally, he spoke. "I've been thinking a lot about Grandma. About how she kept everything inside." Claire stopped. "She didn't trust anyone to hold it." Ethan nodded. "I don't want to repeat that. I want us to be real." Claire put her hand on his. "We are. Now." After he left, she sat down and began drafting a talk. Marissa had followed up on the community center offer. They wanted her to speak at a senior wellness forum in 2 weeks. Not just about aging, but about agency. Claire stared at the blank page. Then she wrote her title. "Still Here. How I Reclaimed My Voice After They Tried to Write Me Off." She smiled. She was only just beginning. The community center was packed. Folding chairs lined every inch of the hall, and the soft murmur of voices buzzed like bees in a garden. Claire stood backstage, heart steady, the printed speech trembling slightly in her hands. She hadn't spoken publicly in years, not since her retirement. And yet, as her name was announced, something ancient and confident rose within her. She stepped onto the stage, the lights warm, the room dim. She took a breath. My name is Claire Mitchell. I'm 58. And 3 months ago, I was nearly sent to a senior living facility against my will. Scattered murmurs. But that's not where the story ends. It's where it begins. She spoke for 15 minutes. About the silent dismantling of autonomy. About the quiet shame society places on aging. About the fire that remained in her bones even as her knees ached. She spoke about the still here circle. About Naomi. About fear and dignity, and the difference between safety and control. She ended with this. I am not the woman I was at 30. I am not the woman I was last year. But I am not less. I am becoming. When she stepped down, the applause was long. Not thunderous, but heartfelt. People approached her afterward. Some just shook her hand. Others cried. One woman, late 60s, said through tears, My daughter's been begging me to downsize. I thought I had to give in. But maybe. I get to decide what letting go looks like. Claire held her hands. Yes, you do. After the forum, she and Naomi sat on a bench outside beneath a copper sky. Naomi passed her a thermos of tea. You were extraordinary, she said. Claire exhaled. I was honest. That's rarer than extraordinary, Naomi replied. They sipped in silence. Around them, the day softened. The traffic eased. The city turned to dusk. Claire looked up at the sky. I used to think aging was about fading. Naomi turned to her. And now? Claire smiled. Now I think it's about distilling. A few days later, the Still Here circle met again. 12 women this time. There was soup and bread and a new member named Dolores who'd recently left her job at 72 because she wanted to paint again. Claire handed her a name tag. Welcome, she said. You're in the right place. That night, as Claire sat in bed, she looked around at her home. The pictures, the chipped mug on the nightstand, the worn rug beneath her feet. Everything had changed, and everything was still hers. She picked up her journal. I am not resisting life anymore. I'm participating in it. Fully. She paused, then added, It took them trying to push me out to realize I've never belonged to their version of aging anyway. I belong to this version, the one I'm still writing. Then she closed the book and turned off the light. Sleep came gently, like a door opening, not closing, and Claire walked through it, steady and unafraid. Claire stood in the garden with pruning shears in hand, the late afternoon sun turning the marigolds a fiery orange. Her hands moved methodically, cutting back what was spent, making space for new growth. It had become her favorite metaphor. Even beauty, she'd learned, needed boundaries. Even the strongest blooms needed shaping. It had been 6 weeks since the community forum, and life had only grown richer. The Still Here circle was thriving, 14 regular members now, each with her own rhythm and rituals. They rotated homes, shared stories, traded recipes, and began weaving the quiet, collective fabric of a rebellion, a gentle one, but powerful. Claire had begun keeping a separate journal just for quotes from the group. Gloria's, I don't want to be admired, I want to be believed, had earned its own page. Dolores had shared a line that lingered in Claire's head every morning. What if this chapter is the one where I finally fall in love with myself? She clipped the last of the lavender and gathered it into a small bundle. Tomorrow, Naomi would arrive in the morning, and they planned to make sachets for the group's next session. Claire headed inside, the scent of herbs trailing after her. The house felt lived in again, not watched over. Naomi's presence remained consistent but unintrusive. Support, not surveillance. On Mondays, Claire cooked. On Wednesdays, they listened. To jazz and played cards. Sometimes they just sat and read together, in companionable quiet. Ethan visited once a week, sometimes with Marissa, sometimes alone. Each time he seemed less guarded, more settled. He had begun asking questions, not about her body, but about her thoughts, her feelings. It made a difference. Tonight, he was coming for dinner. Claire had made chicken with lemon and thyme, his favorite from childhood. The table was set with blue plates and a candle flickering in the center. There was no occasion, no announcements, just time and space and presence. When Ethan arrived, he kissed her cheek and took a deep breath. "Smells like home," he said. Claire smiled. That's the idea. Over dinner, they talked about nothing and everything. Ethan shared a story about a mishap at work involving a broken projector and an overzealous intern. Claire laughed, wiping tears from the corners of her eyes. Halfway through dessert, Ethan grew quiet. Then he said, "I've been thinking about moving." Claire paused, fork midair. "Moving?" "Not far," he said quickly. "Same town, just a bit farther from Marissa's parents, closer to here. I want to be near, not out of guilt, just because I want to." Claire set down her fork. "That means more than you know." They moved to the couch afterward, coffee mugs warming their hands. "I realized," Ethan said, "I kept waiting for some perfect balance to emerge between my marriage, my work, my relationship with you. But life doesn't hand you balance. You build it." Claire nodded. "Brick by brick." "I don't want to be reactive anymore," he said. "I want to show up with intention." Claire reached over and took his hand. "Then start here." That night, after he left, Claire stood at the window and watched the soft pulse of porch lights blinking across the neighborhood. The world had grown quieter, but not dimmer, just more deliberate. The next morning, she woke before dawn and walked to the park as the sky turned lavender. The air held that early stillness, when nothing has yet demanded your attention, when your thoughts belong only to you. She sat on the bench near the fountain, the same one she'd visited with Naomi weeks ago. A squirrel darted by. Somewhere nearby, a dog barked twice, then fell silent. Claire closed her eyes. She thought of her mother's silence, of the long years when she herself had equated strength with solitude. And then she thought of Naomi's quiet hand on hers, Lily's sarcasm masking fierce loyalty, Ethan's uncertain voice asking to be part of her world again, and herself, unfolding like a paper that had been creased for too long. When she returned home, she pulled out her journal and wrote, "I am no longer waiting to be rescued from aging. I am here for all of it." The stiff mornings, the aching joints, the laughter that comes faster than it used to, the deepening, the whittling down to what matters. I am not fading. I am being clarified. That afternoon, the Still Here circle gathered in Claire's backyard under a string of lights they'd strung between fence posts. Naomi brought folding chairs. Lily brought a pitcher of sangria. Gloria brought her harmonica, which she swore she hadn't touched in 30 years. But it was the arrival of someone new that shifted the air. A woman in her early 40s, shoulder-length curls, denim jacket, cautious eyes. Her name was June. "I know I'm younger than most of you," she said after introducing herself, "but I'm watching my mother go through some of the same struggles you've talked about. And I guess I came here to understand, and maybe to prepare." The group welcomed her without hesitation. Later, Claire pulled her aside. "You belong here. This isn't a group about age. It's about claiming voice." June smiled. "Then I'm in the right place." After most of the women had gone home, June lingered. She stood near the rose bushes, arms folded, looking down. Claire approached, quietly. "Heavy night?" June laughed, but it was brittle. "I didn't expect to cry. I didn't realize how angry I was, watching my mother shrink herself. How I've started doing the same thing, apologizing for existing past my so-called prime." Claire placed a hand on her shoulder. You don't have to shrink to survive. Not here, not anywhere. June turned to her. How did you learn to take up space again? Claire considered that. By being forced to confront what I'd given away, and realizing no one was going to hand it back. I had to take it. June nodded, eyes shining. Thank you. After she left, Naomi helped fold up chairs. As they worked, Naomi said, I think you've started something bigger than you meant to. I hope so, Claire replied. But even if not, it's changed me. They stood in the dark yard, stars scattered overhead. Naomi looked over. Have you thought about... What comes next? Claire smiled. I think. Maybe a book. Or at least essays. There's more in here than I thought. You'd write something beautiful, Naomi said softly. That night, Claire lit a candle at her writing desk and pulled out a fresh page. Dear younger me, I know you're scared. You've been holding everything together for so long that the idea of needing help feels like failure. But it's not. You will learn that strength doesn't always look like standing tall. Sometimes it looks like sitting down and letting someone else pour the tea. You will survive heartbreak, loneliness, and the betrayal of silence. But you will also rediscover laughter, stubbornness, and the untouchable core of who you are. Aging won't erase you. It will etch you deeper into the world. It will make you real. Don't fear the day they call you older. That's the day you begin again. With love, Claire. She folded the letter and placed it inside the back of her journal. Then she turned off the lamp, stood by the window, and looked out over the quiet street. The future was not a threat anymore. It was a gift, not promised, but present. And she was finally here to receive it, with open eyes, an open door, and a heart still unfolding. A week later, June returned to the circle, this time with her mother in tow. Her name was Harriet. Thin, soft-spoken, wearing a wide-brimmed hat and the wary expression of someone who'd been talked into showing up. Claire greeted her warmly and offered her the seat closest to the garden window. The discussion that day centered on legacy. What do you want to leave behind? Lily asked. The answers varied. Recipes, photo albums, letters, laughter. Harriet stayed quiet for most of it, but near the end, she spoke. I thought if I stayed small, I'd be safe. But I look at my daughter and I see the toll it's taken. I want to leave her something different. Courage, maybe. June's hand reached for her mother's. They held on, neither speaking for a long moment. After the group disbanded, Claire sat with June at the kitchen table while Harriet chatted quietly with Naomi. She's different today, June said. I didn't think she'd come. She came because you did, Claire said. Sometimes all we need is a model, someone willing to go first. That evening, Claire found herself sorting through old teaching files in the attic, dusty boxes of assignments, cards, photographs, and newspaper clippings. She opened a yellowing folder labeled Spring 2002. Inside was a poem written by a student who had barely spoken in class for months. Ms. Mitchell said I had a voice, so I decided to try it. She didn't ask me to be loud, just real. Claire read it 3 times, then carefully slid it into her journal. The next day, Ethan stopped by with a package wrapped in brown paper. It's not a big deal, he said. Just something I thought you'd like. She unwrapped it to find a wooden plaque, hand-carved with the words, Still here, still becoming. Claire touched the letters with reverence. Where did you find this? I didn't. I had it made, Ethan said, a bit sheepishly. You inspire people, Mom. You inspired me. She hugged him then, fully, fiercely, with the kind of embrace that carried forgiveness, history, and pride. Later, she hung the plaque above her writing desk. And that night, when she sat down to write, she didn't start with a journal entry or a poem. She began chapter 1. Because some stories don't end. They evolve. And Claire Mitchell, 60, now was still writing hers. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.